Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Tuesday, May 14th, 2013, halfway through May. We're getting closer and closer to summer. Of course, you wouldn't know it up there in Minnesota where they're still shoveling the ice out of their homes here. We've got so much stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Manny is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Obviously, a lot of breaking news. We've got so much stuff going on. Just finished watching White House press spokesperson Carney getting up there trying to tamp down these growing scandals. Basically, the talking points coming out of the White House is that Obama had no idea the IRS was targeting his political enemies and had absolutely no idea the Department of Justice was just sifting through the phone records of the Associated Press and quite possibly others. And they're still taking the position, that nothing may have happened. Carney kept repeating over and over again, if these allegations are true. Well, we're kind of past that point because the IRS has already admitted they did this to Obama's political enemies. And the Department of Justice basically admitted to the Associated Press, yeah, we've been going through your telephone records. And we're still getting effectively a no comment because it's an ongoing investigation. The spin after that is the need to protect the nation, the national security against terror threats. That means the corporate media. And so for you corporate media people who are peeking into the show, and I know you're out there because I get fan letters from some of them, welcome to our world. You are now viewed as an enemy of the state. After all these years of covering up the murder of Vince Foster, of selling America the myth of Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, of parroting all of these stories about how the economy is really on the rise, and, if you're personally hungry and homeless and jobless, it's really all your fault. After all this unquestioned support of the U.S. government, and by the way, you probably ought to rename your news network to The Government Says, for all the reporting you've actually been doing. And now, as repayment for all those years of blind, unquestioning support to the political establishment going back at least the 20 years that I've been involved in doing what I'm doing. This is your reward. This is your payment. This is how the government returns that loyalty to you. You are now viewed as a potential enemy threat to national security, and they're just going to go through your phone records. Just to make sure, just in case you're talking to somebody the government doesn't think you ought to be talking to. Journalists, of course, are outraged if the goal of this maneuver was to scare the corporate media into just sitting at their desk, not talking to anybody, and just churning out those propaganda statements from the government as news. I don't think it worked. A lot of people are very, very angry in the corporate media. This may be the watershed moment where the corporate media wakes up and realizes, hey, we have been used by these bozos, and this is how they're paying us back. And by no means is this just confined to the Associated Press. The Associated Press was notified by the Department of Justice. They wanted the corporate media to know this was going on. The government wants the corporate media to know they are being watched in order to discourage all the would-be Woodward and Bernsteins from talking to the wrong kind of people as the stories about Benghazi Gate and IRS Gate start to explode into the public view. And instead of tamping things down, it's added another gate. DOJ Gate or AP Gate or whatever you're going to call it. It's third strike. And we're going to get back into this after these words from our sponsors. Do join us on the air. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about all these exploding scandals. It was a double whammy a few days ago. Now it's a triple whammy. And I am absolutely convinced the reason the Department of Justice informed the AP after the fact of the acquisition of their phone records was intended to send a message to the corporate media, be careful who you talk to, we're watching you. To chill the news gathering process, to basically encourage or coerce all of the corporate media people to simply sit at their desk accept the government's press handouts and report that as straight news, which they've been loyally doing for going on at least 20 years, probably longer than that. We know longer than that, all the way back to the Kennedy assassination. We got Look magazine was caught flagrantly lying about it to try and sell the official story. And after all that time and all that loyalty, today the corporate media woke up and realized that after sort of joking about how the Patriot movement was upset about the loose application of terror suspect coming out of the fusion centers, how anybody talking about the Constitution is a threat to the national security and all the rest, and the corporate media was, they're just making a big deal out of nothing. And guess what? Today they're finding out they're on the list. They're on the list. Because the Department of Justice did not have probable cause to target any of these AP reporters, let alone cast a wide net across the entire reporting organization. And this is actually going to turn out to be a good thing, because now all these corporate media reporters are realizing the government they trusted and covered up for does not trust them. And we are definitely into Richard Nixon territory here. And for those of you in the corporate media who are listening to this show, I have some advice. Ignore the spying. Nothing ever comes of it. After a while, you get used to it, and eventually it's just part of the background noise. This Department of Justice revelation to Associated Press is intended to make you afraid to do your proper job. Are you going to let them succeed? Would Edward R. Murrow have let them succeed? And I think if there's one point of unanimous opinion between the corporate media and the independent media is how much we all admire and respect Edward R. Murrow for standing up for what was right during the McCarthy era. Meanwhile, I went over to Ben & Jerry's ice cream page. They have a little page where you can suggest a new flavor. And I proposed a new ice cream for President Obama called Impeach, complete with the Obamacare paperwork on the carton to report your unhealthy eating habits directly to the Internal Revenue Service here. Now, again, we're getting this thing from the White House. They're saying they had no idea that this was going on. Well, Obama, that's kind of your job. Both the Internal Revenue Service and the Department of Justice nominally work for the executive branch. And if you're going to stand up there and say that you had no idea what your own staff was doing, you've just basically admitted to the entire country you are incompetent to be the chief executive. Do the honorable thing and resign right now. Because if you can't keep your own staff in line, how are you going to manage an entire country here? Now, Eric Holder has apparently now recused himself from the investigation into exactly what happened with AP and their phone numbers. And by the way, the official spin is it's a leak investigation. We had to investigate AP because leaks were going on. And they weren't investigating a leak. If they were investigating a leak, there would have been one journalist targeted. There would have been the appropriate warrants to go after the phone records. This was just a blanket snooping across the entire corporate media. And believe me, it is not confined just to Associated Press. They did it to everybody. They announced it to Associated Press to send out that message to the journalists, be careful who you talk to, we are watching you. I don't think it's going to work. The journalists are going to basically start carrying out their communications with inside sources with disposable cell phones, or they're going to arrange meetings, or they're going to start going to dropping information inside hollowed out nickels or whatever. Now, getting over here to this IRS scandal, where the IRS has now admitted, now the White House is saying if these allegations are true, they're true. They're not allegations anymore. The IRS admitted doing this, targeting patriot groups, the Tea Party, Occupy, anybody who was criticizing the running of the country was targeted by the Internal Revenue Service. I have a quote for you. He has, acting personally and through his subordinates and agents, endeavored to cause, in violation of the constitutional rights of citizens, income tax audits or other income tax investigations to be initiated or conducted in a discriminatory manner. That is from Article 2, Section 1 of the Articles of Impeachment against Richard Nixon, adopted by the House Judiciary Committee, July 29, 1974. This use of the IRS specifically targeting political opponents is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. And now we're getting this story. This is out of Newsmax here, where the highest IRS officials in Washington were involved in this plan to target political dissenters. So this goes right to the top. Remember the other day they're saying, oh, this was just a few rogue agents just acting on their own. Not anymore. That claim is no longer operational, which is what Nixon's press spokesman used to say. Every time a new lie was expressed, you lied about this. Well, that claim is no longer operational. Pay no attention to it. The trail of guilt, the trail of using the IRS as a political tool to shut down dissenters, to violate their rights to freedom of speech, goes right to the top of the IRS. Now, I have absolutely no doubt that Obama will gladly throw the head of the IRS to the wolves to save himself, probably Eric Holder as well, to save himself, just like Richard Nixon did with Attorney General John Mitchell. And a reminder, it didn't work. It didn't save Nixon to offer up all those smaller heads. Now, a House Republican has already ordered hearings on the IRS use for political repression on Friday. The Tea Party groups and other groups who were targeted are considering suing the Internal Revenue Service, and well, they should. We have to make this a big stink. The time has come to stand up and start saying this has gone on long enough. We the people must take control of our nation and make right what was done wrong across the board. The fortress that was built around the federal government is showing cracks. And we have to focus on those cracks. Even Jon Stewart was on the air on his show, on the Daily Show, saying this IRS scandal, I guess the tinfoil crowd was right. Yeah, we were. And by the way, John, I've never worn a tinfoil hat in my entire life. Now, a top-ranking Republican in the Senate Armed Services Committee is now openly talking impeachment, in his case over what happened in Benghazi. And as much as I would love to see Obama impeached, I don't think it's going to happen. This Congress, that grand benevolent asylum for the aged and infirm, lacks the gonadal tissue to stand up to an abusive president, or they would have done it long before now. Congress won't do anything. They'll harumph and they'll make speeches and they'll look shocked and upset. But in the end, they won't do anything. And we, the people, will be wasting our time if we sit and wait for Congress to act to save this nation. They're not doing their job. They've never been doing their job. We have to do it. We're going to grab a phone call here. Rick in Florida. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Just calling to touch base real quick on what you're talking about. The infrastructure that we're referring to that the government is operating under is a Stasi East German infrastructure.
Yes.
The person that the government 1099 to employ to do this, to set up the logistic work, his name was Marcus Wolf. He was head of the East German DDR Stasi. Even if you talk to some Russians that were in the intel business back in the day, they're going to tell you that the East Germans really, really were the top masters of data collection and human intelligence.
Oh, they went to extraordinary lengths. They were collecting smells from people.
That's correct. And you will see that we are going to see a process where the Internal Revenue Service will start gathering information under Obamacare. You have not yet begun to see how intense this is going to get.
Well, that's why right now we have an opportunity to just basically derail this whole process. Because Obama is already understanding, with these 3 scandals exploding in his face, his political capital in Washington, D.C. is rapidly falling. And I think the House is probably going to push to repeal Obamacare, and they might get the votes. Because people, Obama's coattails just shrank a huge, huge amount. Now, Obama, believe it or not, is out there blaming Rush Limbaugh for his inability to get the Congress to do what he wants. And I'm surprised that Obama isn't blaming the independent media, but then he probably doesn't want to admit even to himself that we, the independent media, have become a major influence on American popular opinion. We got to take a break for commercials here. Rick, stay on the line. I'm going to come back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're still talking with Rick in Florida. Rick, you had something else you wanted to add to the discussion.
Yes, sir. One last thing. The committee, the select committee that they're putting together to review Benghazi, be very careful. That's a Trojan horse. What that's done is being designed to review all the facts of what transpired, which will take 24 months to finish.
Yes.
And there's no punitive damages to the end of it. All that is designed to do is to gather information and buy time for this administration.
It's basically to head off all other investigations. I mean, that's what the Warren Commission did. They shut down all the Texas investigations. They shut down investigations in New Orleans, which is what got Jim Garrison all hot and bothered. And they said, we, the federal government, will investigate and tell you what to think, but nobody's going to fall for that any longer. And that's why I was saying in the last segment, we the people are going to waste our time if we sit on our butts and wait for Congress to act on any of this thing. We have the information we need to go out and start talking with our friends and families about just what has gone wrong with this country, and now's the time to do it.
You're absolutely going to need an independent prosecutor, and that will shake the bushes clean of people that don't want to get information out. Will start coming out. If you go ahead with the select committee, you'll have 24 months to buy time for them to do whatever they want to do, start a world war, whatever it is they want to do.
Yes.
The rest of us will go on with our lives, and you'll never hear the end of Benghazi.
No, I'm in agreement with that, but you need to understand something about the independent media here at Republic Broadcasting. We're not going to just stop talking about Benghazi because there's a select committee looking at it. You know, I have long ago decided not to let Congress or the federal government tell me what to think or what to look into. And it's not a coincidence that the Department of Justice sent this letter to AP right now when IRS Gate and Benghazi Gate were starting to explode into view. Remember, this grabbing of the AP phone records happened months and months ago. So the only reason for the Department of Justice to notify them right now is to send a message to the entire corporate media, we're watching you, but it's going to blow up in their face. Yeah, the corporate media is going to be very incensed to be lumped together with all of us tinfoil hat-wearing independent media conspiracy wackos. And it was an act of panic to do that. And I don't think anybody's going to be paying attention to the Select Committee or anything that's coming out of the United States Congress right now. What this is going to do, and judging by the numbers at my website this morning, it's driving more and more Americans to find out what's going on out here in the independent media. And I think that's going to be the net result of all of this thing. So the Select Committee can sit there and talk and jaw all they want to do. It's not going to change anything because the people are not psychologically dependent on the Congress to tell them what's going on.
Stay tenacious, sir. Stay tenacious. And remember, it's the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Suggestions.
Absolutely. It's the Bill of Rights. It's not a Bill of Suggestions. All righty then, moving right along, and let me just have one more comment. These are huge scandals. Carney was out there saying, really, it's politically motivated, it's a side issue, there's no there, blah, 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 blah. And again, Richard Nixon said exactly the same thing about the burglary of the Watergate. And most of the corporate media back then went along with it. Oh, it's a non-issue, it's unconnected with the campaign to re-elect the president. And it basically, it kept going and going until finally it just exploded all over the place. And this is not going to go away. We, the independent media, will not let these go away. And I imagine right now that there's a lot of people out there in the corporate media who are angered at this government snooping into their work, where they're going to say, I will find a way to do my job even if they are looking at my phone records. They can swap cell phones for a day, completely invalidate whatever's being collected. Now then. All right, getting over to the Middle East here. And we will come back to this because it's a huge, huge scandal. Again, we're in Richard Nixon territory. And again, as much as I'd like to see Obama impeached, I don't think this Congress is going to do it. Our opportunity here right now is to take all of these scandals and go out to our friends and neighbors and say, look, we have been telling you all along this government has gone in a bad direction. This just confirms it. And again, I think a good indicator that the corporate media is definitely abandoning Obama's administration. On Fox News, following Jake Carney saying we have no idea what's going on here, they played that clip from the old Hogan's Hero TV show, Sergeant Schultz, I know nothing, which, you know, we've been using that clip on whatreallyhappened.com for a long time. Every time we get this in, I have no idea what's going on. And if Obama wants to sit there and say he had no idea what the IRS and the Department of Justice were up to, that's fine, because he's confessing to the nation he can't run his own staff, which means he's incompetent to be running a country, like we didn't already know that. And when that president gets up there and says, I have no idea what the IRS and Department of Justice are doing, he should follow it by saying, I hereby tender my resignation. Because he can't do the job, or he isn't doing the job. All right, getting into the Mideast, and by the way, it is quite likely that the pressure of all of these growing scandals here at home is only going to panic Obama into trying to get that world war really cranked up. So we'll forgive and forget. Yes, we were using the IRS on our enemies, and yes, the Department of Justice is, surveilling the corporate media, but there's a war on, and we've all got to unite behind the flag and throw our babies onto the designated enemy. We're going to be talking about the escalation for war after we come back from these words from our sponsor. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about the escalating war situation. They still want their war with Syria. They want their war with Iran. They want their war with everybody to bring the blessings of private central banking to the entire world, as the imaginary playmate in the sky hath decreed it to be, must be so, or whatever. Apparently, a Turkish warplane, an F-16, has gone missing somewhere near the Syrian border. And some reports are saying the Turkish jet crashed inside Syria itself. So it may have been another attempt to provoke a crisis. And the reason they're starting to ramp that up is the Syrian troops, the government troops, are starting to make significant gains as the hired mercenaries' enthusiasm to get blown up in exchange for a paycheck continues to wane. And apparently Syrian troops have taken full control of a town near a highway linking Damascus with the Jordanian border down in the south. And this is very significant because apparently Hezbollah fighters in Jordan are approaching that border to join Assad's troops. And these are not just ragtag volunteers. These are fully formed and supported military units that are coming in to try and crush this hired mercenary army. And the U.S., of course, if they lose Syria, if the U.S. government loses Syria, they've lost their stepping stone to the war with Iran. And the American people, if they see a military defeat, their ardor for supporting any more of these wars is going to wane. And that's applying not only to Syria, but over in Libya, where the Libyan people are very actively trying to oust their brand-new U.S.-approved puppet regime and their brand-new Federal Reserve-approved private central bank issuing the public currencies a loan at interest. And as a matter of fact, the United States is moving a Marine landing force closer to Libya. They're going to have to re-invade the place and reconquer it. Now, that's going to be a tough sell. We invaded Libya to save them from Gaddafi and save them from that evil gold dinar and save them from their state central bank, and they should love us for it. And they don't, obviously. And so now the U.S. is positioning military forces to go back into Libya a second time and make sure those gosh darn conquered Libyans stay conquered. Now, interesting development. There's been a lot of talk about this bombing in Turkey, which was blamed on Syria. Syria said, we didn't do it. Pretty much everybody's saying it was either Turkey itself or another Mossad operation. Now it's come out that all of the closed-circuit TV cameras in the area where the bombs went off weren't working. ooh, what an amazing coincidence. We have this massive breakdown in all the security TV cameras in the area, so we have no idea what really happened, but trust us, it was Syria. Now, the winner of the recent Pakistan elections, Nawaz Sharif, he's going to be prime minister for a third term, is now saying it is time for the United States to halt the drone strikes into Pakistan. Because actually, it makes a lot of sense for him to say that. We're not actually in a war with Pakistan. And these drone strikes, when they go in and they hit a terror suspect who has not been given a trial before a jury of his peers, for whom there's been no evidence of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt presented, every time they get one of these terror suspects, an average of 50 innocent bystanders gets killed. But remember, they only hate us for our freedoms. And you need to keep something in mind. It came out only a few weeks ago that the Bush and Obama administrations have known all along the vast majority of people being held in Guantanamo are innocent of any wrongdoing. They were kept in Guantanamo because it would be a political embarrassment to let them go and say, hey, we tortured the wrong guys. And if the vast majority of people in Guantanamo are innocent of any wrongdoing, it stands to reason the vast majority of these targeted terror suspects in Pakistan, Yemen, and everywhere else the drones are going into are also innocent of any wrongdoing against the United States of America. This is a terror campaign waged from the skies by the Obama and previously the Bush administrations. They're trying to use these drones to basically do to Pakistan what Hitler's V1 and V2 were trying to do to Great Britain. Terrorize the general population into forcing their government to capitulate to the demands of the invading horror, for lack of a better word. And it didn't work in Great Britain. It hardened the resolve of the British people against Nazi Germany. And we should not be surprised that these drone strikes are hardening the resolve of the people in these countries against the United States of America. I'm really beginning to think that most of Washington, D.C. really are on these SSRIs because their decision-making skills seem to be deeply, deeply, deeply flawed. Now, the continuing of stink face against Iran is underscored by this story, and this was coming out of Press TV. The United States is going to boycott the United Nations Disarmament Conference because it's Iran's turn to assume the presidency of the body. Everybody who's part of this UN Disarmament Conference, they all take turns being the president, and obviously when Iran assumes the presidency of the Disarmament Conference, the first thing they're going to say is, we have a problem with Israel having all these nuclear weapons, not having IAEA inspections, not signing the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and not able to go 6 months without invading a neighbor. And the United States, of course, still hopelessly enslaved to the Israeli government, is going to stand there and say, oh, we cannot lend our reputation and our credibility to the Disarmament Conference if they're going to criticize Israel. Because nobody's allowed to criticize Israel in the U.S. view here. By the way, one of the Fox TV reporters openly came out and said these three gates really do undermine the credibility of the U.S. government as a whole. They're edging closer and closer to the idea the federal government has delegitimized itself with all these crimes and corruptions. I'm going to have to take back some of the bad things I've been saying about Fox News. Russia is demanding that Iran attend the Geneva conference regarding Syria. They're trying to pull together this conference in Geneva. What are we going to do about Syria? And Russia's coming in and saying, look, Iran is their neighbor. They have influence in the region. We've got to involve them. And, of course, Israel and the United States are saying, no, we can't have Iranians in here. They'll say the wrong things. Can't have that going on. Meanwhile, new scandal for the CIA, otherwise known as the Cocaine Importation Agency. Apparently, Russian authorities have arrested an employee from the U.S. Embassy in Moscow who was caught trying to recruit a member of the Russian security services as a spy. The Russians are saying the guy they've arrested is CIA. The U.S. is saying, oh, no, he's just diplomatic staff here. I tend to go with the Russians' view on this thing. spokeswoman for the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, declined to comment. Now, we're still seeing this fury over Stephen Hawking boycotting the Israeli science conference that Netanyahu was putting together to try and showcase Israel as a world leader in scientific achievement, which they aren't really. What they do is they take all this money that is taken from the taxpayers of the United States of America, and they buy up high-tech companies, they move them to Israel, and then they say, look what we, Israel, have accomplished. That's like somebody going over and buying a painting by another artist, hanging it on the wall, and say, look, I'm now an artist. Doesn't really work that way. So Alan Dershowitz is out there, raising on a busted flush, calling Stephen Hawking an ignoramus, a lemming, and accusing him of, ta-da, you knew this was coming, anti-Semitism. Yeah, Alan, you look really butch there, picking on a guy who's in a wheelchair. A little reminder, Mr. Dershowitz. Back in 1948, Albert Einstein, who he's definitely in the same category with Stephen Hawking. I'm not going to get into an argument of which one of them is more brilliant or not. But we both concede. These are people with a lot of brains there. Albert Einstein, in 1948, wrote a letter to the New York Times expressing his concern that the government of the newly created State of Israel was already displaying trends similar to those of the Nazi and fascist parties. So I guess Alan Dershowitz is now going to start screaming that Einstein is an ignoramus and an anti-Semite, which is kind of hard to do since Einstein was Jewish. And they're overplaying that word, anti-Semitism, and they don't realize. They've burned it out. Nobody cares anymore. Interesting article was over in mycatbirdseat.com, just going on about this moral blackmail exercised by people like Lantos Sweat. And we've all seen that video by that member of the Knesset over at Democracy Now!, where she's just saying, it's a trick. When somebody is saying something we can't argue against, we scream anti-Semitism to shut them up. Well, we're not shutting up anymore. Because you've overused that word, it's lost its shock value. When you brainwash and condition somebody to react in horror at a word, you can't overuse it. Because then it burns out. Nobody cares anymore. None of us are born with an instinct to be shocked at certain words, whether it's profanity or racial epithets or anti-Semite. We have to be brainwashed into it. We have to be conditioned, like Pavlov's dogs, to drool when the bell rings, or to go, when we hear the N-word. It's a learned response. It is not natural, it is not instinctive, and it is done to give people who use those words control over you. And that's exactly what Israel's been doing. They make anti-Semite a word that you react in horror to. Well, just like in the 1950s, when the U.S. government made commie a word that you would react in horror to. So when you're talking about the validity of various wars and other actions around the globe, and you start saying, why are we throwing our money and our kids in this war? Then they say, well, they're commies. And your brain starts going, blah, 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 and you stop thinking. And you go along with the agenda. And that's what Israel has been doing with this word anti-Semite. It's the new version of McCarthyism. Back then, the word was commie. Now it's anti-Semite, but it's the same dirty trick all over again, except that now it's not really working, because they've overplayed their hand. And the Zionistas are out there trying to demonize one of the most brilliant scientific minds in all of history. A guy who's in a wheelchair, who has overcome these amazing challenges to do what he's done. And because he won't show up at Netanyahu's, hey, look how great we are scientifically conference, now they're going to smear him and try and demonize him. And boy, did they bite off more than they can choose. More than they can chew, rather. They're hoisting with their own petard on this one. Meanwhile, speaking of education, we're seeing a very alarming trend where the U.S. government, and this is from thefire.org, the U.S. government, specifically the Department of Justice and the Department of Education, fresh from reading all of the AP reporters' phone records here, are joining together to issue a set of guidelines for speeches on university campuses. In other words, if you're going on to a university campus anywhere in America to give a speech, you have to follow government guidelines as to what you can say and, more importantly, what you can't say. And I'm willing to bet that comments about Israel are somewhere on that list. This is a violation of the First Amendment. Universities, at least when I was a kid, which was admittedly a while ago, universities were where you went to be exposed to new ideas and new thoughts, to form your own opinion about the world and your place in it. Not just continue the policy of political indoctrination that you had to endure in grade school and high school. Speaking of grade school and high school, up in Michigan, the Buena Vista schools have fired all of their teachers and closed all their schools. Now, yes, we're coming up on the summer holiday, so it's not that big a loss to the students, but they're basically saying the schools will be closed until further notice. They have run out of money. They're out of money. They're out of cash. Completely gone. Wasn't the federal government supposed to be funding the schools from the Department of Education? They took it over from the states because they wanted the federal government to control the curriculum. And so the deal was, here, we'll give you money for your schools as long as you teach the kids to think this and to react in shock at commie and anti-Semite and whatever else they're putting up. And Muslims. Got to demonize the Muslims here. And so what we're getting is this message from the federal government. To paraphrase from the American president, governing is choosing. Governing is prioritizing. And right now, propping up Wall Street, giving weapons to Israel, and bombing the crap out of anyone who won't accept private central banking is more important than taking care of the kids. Besides, if those kids want an education, there's always the armed forces, right? The just purpose of taxation is to take care of this nation. That's why when the Founding Fathers put together that Constitution, they didn't ban all taxes. What they banned were direct, non-apportioned taxes. The idea being that, yes, we, the American people, would pay taxes, but that same money would come back from the government to us to take care of us and our nation. That's what the apportionment clause is all about. It allows the government to tax the people to take care of the people. It forbids the government from taking money from the people and just giving it to somebody else, like Wall Street or Israel or the security-industrial complex or the military-industrial complex or cronies. Education is under attack in this country. I mean, because education has become all about indoctrination, our kids are graduating these schools without really having the skills to compete in a modern global technological marketplace. And as a result, we're getting this story out of Business Insider. College-educated Americans are more unemployed than you might think. And these are kids who graduated, most of them with huge, huge student loan bills that they can't pay on these minimum wage jobs they're having to take, or these internships they're having to go through to even be considered for a paying job. It's the new form of slavery. College is sold on the idea that if you get a college degree, you will make more money over your lifetime. That's a promise they can't keep. Those high-paying jobs that require a college degree have left the country. The high-paying jobs have left the building. The city of Detroit is financially insolvent. Remember their emergency manager who went up there to basically cut all social spending, even with all the cuts. They're saying basically in another couple of weeks, Detroit will be completely out of money. There is the future of America under the Federal Reserve System. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, the G7 are apparently holding an unscheduled meeting later this week. The official statement is that they want to coordinate efforts to fight against tax dodgers and tax cheats internationally, forgetting that taxes are already insanely too high, and it doesn't do any good because it doesn't matter how much you take in taxes You can never pay off the debt coming out of a private central bank that issues the public currency as a loan at interest. Cannot be done. It is by design impossible to hold the nation and its people slaves to the debt created by the private central bankers. So what I suspect may be going on with this unscheduled G7 meeting is they finally come to realize the pyramid is about to collapse, and it's all going to come down together. The reality that there is no 11th marble has finally percolated its way through the haze that these people are all suffering from, all these prescription antidepressants they're no doubt on. And so now they're trying to figure out some way that they can transition out of this system without admitting fault and criminality in order to stay in control of whatever economic system is going to come on following that. And I don't think they can succeed in doing that, because too many people around the world understand the concept of the 11th marble and how private central banking does not serve the people and does not serve the nation. There is only one solution, and that is that the public currency must be handled as a public utility, not a private money-making venture for the bankers. Having private bankers in charge of a nation's economy makes no more sense than having a drug addict in charge of the pharmacies. You're not going to get a good result. We're going to go to the phones here. Art off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing today?
Doing all right.
Talking about Mr. Hawking, and you made reference to Einstein. Well, first of all, I guess Mr. Einstein must have been a self-hating Jew, as is Norman Finkelstein and a whole host of others, including all of these Jews all around the world who are protesting against Israel's behavior.
Yes.
But let's not forget, we've all heard the statement by Shulamit Alani when she was on Amy Goodman, and she made the reference when Amy asked how Alani's response to people who seem to have problems with the policies of Israel and how Israel automatically throws out the anti-Semites.
Yes.
And she said, well, it's a trick. We always use it. Well, we've all heard this.
Yes.
But what I've noticed is when people bring this up, they fail to go into what else she said during that statement. And I'd kind of like to let people, kind of remind people of basically what this woman was saying in the rest of this statement. Because she went on to talk about how over in Europe, whenever there's speak against Israel,
they would use the Holocaust. They would use the Holocaust. I remember she said that. And again, that's something.
She said a lot more than that.
Okay, well, Art, you need to stay on the line. We've got to take a break for station identification, and we'll come back to you after these. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Art off the grid, and we're talking about that video of the former member of the Knesset who was interviewed on Democracy Now! And basically said that Israel just uses anti-Semite as a trick to shut down discussions in America that are critical to Israel, for which Israel doesn't really have a valid answer. And she did go on to say, in Europe they use the Holocaust. If anybody in Europe is criticizing Israel, they go, Holocaust, Holocaust, Holocaust. And those Europeans who've been brainwashed into reacting to that word, the way Americans in the 1950s were brainwashed into reacting to the word commie, would just shut up and go along with whatever Israel was saying. Art? Artie? Yeah.
I heard music in the background, so I knew that was going to be a short segment. But anyway, she went on and she made reference to how they use the word Holocaust in Europe, and just as they use anti-Semite here. But she also went on, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase because I don't remember the exact quote, but she said, but it's okay because, there are some really brilliant people in Israel, and, they have power and money and the media and other things like this, and that their attitude is, my country right or wrong,
What a contemptible lie.
Sure, my country right or wrong, and that they're not ready to hear criticism, and so they will use this to blame anyone who criticizes Israel for whatever they might happen to do, and by bringing up the Holocaust and bringing up anti-Semitic as a way to demonize these people, that's how they justify what they do to the people in Palestine. Now, I mean, if that's not clear indication of exactly what these people think, I mean, you justify what you do.
It is a very fanatical. It's a fanatical point of view, one that does not entertain the possibility of self-error. I think according to the diagnostic manual that's put out by the American Psychiatric Association, that would be considered clear signs of mental illness.
Yeah. But you know, Mike, I mean, this is typical of these people, and I don't understand why anybody would be surprised at this kind of behavior. But you know, when I think about this, and I think about how they're demonizing Hawking, and I mean, after all, he's Jewish, so he must be a self-hating Jew, and Einstein must have been a self-hating Jew because of his criticism, which kind of makes me wonder, Mike, are you a self-hating? I'm sorry,
I'm not self-hating at all. Period. End of discussion. Okay.
And that's something else I've noticed too, man. There's a lot of people out there demonizing you just because of your Jewish heritage. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. Mike Rivero is one of the most outspoken people I have ever listened to who speaks against Israel. How can you call him a Zionist elitist?
Well, they're grasping at straws. They're grasping. It's just like with Stephen Hawking screaming he's an ignoramus and making fun of his wheelchair thing. And by the way, a clarification, I'm not Jewish. I never have been. Okay, I have a Sephardic ancestry. Rivero is a Sephardic name. I was raised Congregationalist. It didn't stick. They gave me a Bible. That was their mistake. I read it, and I'm an atheist. So I'm not Jewish.
I'm not atheist, but I don't follow any specific religion or culture. I like to think of myself as just a very spiritual individual who looks to a number of different doctrines for guidance.
That's a very good approach. That's kind of the way Claire sees herself.
Yeah, I keep it very simple. I like to think of myself as, you know, I believe that there is something out there that created everything and everyone, but I'm not willing to try to identify it because, you know, I'm not one of those who stand up and say, I'm right and my way is the only way and anybody who disagrees with me is going to hell. I'm not trying to go there because I think there are, you know,
death to fanatics. Death to fanatics. Okay, we got to take a commercial break. Thank you for the call. We got to take a commercial break here. My philosophy is I am not waiting for the imaginary playmate in the sky to make the world better. If there's going to be a better world, we have to do it ourselves. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones. Dan in Oregon. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike, for accepting the phone call. I agree with you. It's very unlikely that the Congress and House would impeach Obama, but I'd like to get your idea. All this scandals that are coming to fruition, as well as false flags and everything else, is that I think for a third term.
I think the dog has an opinion about my show. Anyway, real quick, what's your question?
The question is this: do you think Obama, since he does the unthinkable, is really looking at the possibility of not only declaring martial law, but to terminate the elections based on martial law and still continue as president into a third term? And that's my question.
You know, anything is possible. We're going to let you go here because the dog is obviously not happy that I'm on the air right now. Anything is possible. We can't rule anything out. The nation as a whole is all of a sudden having to confront an administration and indeed an entire federal government that is fraught with corruption and criminality. And again, because these people inside the Beltway in Washington, D.C. don't want to give up that party, anything is possible. We know that even before these scandals started erupting, we saw a clear pattern to try and attempt to disarm the American people, take away the Second Amendment, take away our right to say no. And so at this point, anything is possible. I wouldn't rule anything out. I think it's very, very possible that because of these new scandals, we could see another false flag attack to try and reignite the war fever. We're seeing all of the allies of Obama are out there in a full court press trying to make this go away. In fact, I was just looking at this article at Huffington Post where they're saying, oh, Benghazi's just a witch hunt. It's just politically you don't need to look there. And, of course, we've already come to the understanding that Huffington Post has, in recent times, become one of the gatekeepers here in the independent media, which is why we don't pay a lot of attention to them any longer. But as far as what they could do, Obama and his minions are going to do whatever they believe they can get away with. The problem being their judgment in these matters appears to be severely clouded. Because certainly I think the reason the Department of Justice sent that memo to the Associated Press was they believed it would chill the corporate media. And the response seems to be very much the opposite. Everybody is angry in the corporate media and outside the corporate media as well. And so this has backflashed on them. I think, clearly going back 2 years ago, I think the Obama administration actually believed the public would believe that they got Osama bin Laden and that they would fall for these very poorly made fake photos they flooded all over the Internet. And that was obviously a bad call. And as I keep saying, we know that 10% of the American people are on these SSRI, prescription antidepressants. They fog your decision-making ability, let alone the mass violence and suicide. We have people who are on these antidepressants who just engage in bizarre behavior that they can't explain. And we may presume that at least 10% of our federal government are on these medications, and it is screwing up their ability to think clearly. Now, during Obama's first term, there was actually a story that came out saying he was dealing with depression, and so he may be on these medications, and that is one of the scariest things right now, because he may decide to turn those little, the little keys in the missile silos, and he thinks it's a great idea, and of course it isn't going to be. And after it's all over, he'll say, I have no idea why I did that. Just popped into my head, and I decided to go with that. All righty, let's see. I think we already let Dan go, and we're going to switch over to James in North Carolina. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I think we may be about the same age.
You have my deepest sympathies.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm a former Watergate junkie. That was in my freshman year in college. That coming up, I guess, now on the 40th anniversary of the Watergate summer.
Yes.
But this kind of brings to mind some questions I thought I'd want to, get your take on. When I went all the way through it, I mean, I just could not tear myself away from the TV screen during those hearings, and read several of the books that came out afterwards. And it was revealed in a couple of them, I'm thinking it was probably in Leon Jaworski's book, that a lot of the Washington insiders, I mean the real insiders in Washington, knew very early in 1973, even before the formation of the special prosecutor, that there was no way Nixon could last. He would have to either resign or it would go on to impeachment and trial. And yet it took an entire year and a half before he finally was forced to resign. And that's one thing I've always thought was a real flaw in our Constitution. That they made it such a lengthy and ponderous process to ever get a president out of office, no matter how incompetent or criminal he proved to be, that he could just hang on month after month after month. And
well, you need to remember, back in Nixon's administration, Congress was, only slightly less spineless than they are right now, and they started considering impeachment only when their own credibility and legitimacy was on the line. And that's when they started the impeachment process, when they finally had absolute obstruction of justice, and there was absolutely no question that he needed to be impeached and convicted. And Nixon, of course, pulled an end run by resigning because they didn't want that trial on the floor of the Senate, because somebody was going to ask, why, with Nixon's reelection, a study in foregone conclusions, did they feel it was necessary to burglarize the Democratic headquarters at the Watergate Hotel? And the answer to that question would have delegitimized the entire government, because the Democrats had gotten hold of photos proving that those tramps who were arrested in Dealey Plaza during the JFK assassination were people who worked for Richard Nixon. E. Howard Hunt was there. I can't remember the name of the other two, but they were known Nixon associates. And they needed to get those photos because the Democrats could have been in a position to blackmail Richard Nixon even if he won the White House. And that was the reason they went in there. And E. Howard Hunt led the burglary because it was his own gluteus was on the line on that. Later on, those same photos surfaced in a group called the Liberty Lobby, and E. Howard Hunt sued them for claiming that he was there in Dealey Plaza, and he lost the lawsuit when Liberty Lobby found a witness who placed E. Howard Hunt in Dealey Plaza at the time of the assassination. So that was the big secret. And remember, as I said earlier in the week, there are two kinds of secrets in Washington, D.C. There are the little secrets that you can use as weapons against your political enemies, and then there are the great secrets that nobody will dare touch. Everybody's protecting. Even your worst enemy is going to protect that secret because it could bring down the entire government, and that ends everybody's party. And the Kennedy assassination was definitely one of the great secrets. 9/11 is a great secret. And that's kind of where we are right now. But Congress didn't want to impeach because they didn't want that question asked, and they were afraid Nixon would get right on the floor and just blow the whole Kennedy assassination wide open. That was one of the tactics that he used to stall impeachment. And it did drag on for a year, and it shouldn't have taken an entire year to do. And my guess is, this thing is going to drag on and on and on, while Obama tries to figure out some way he can crank up World War III into overdrive so he can stand up there and say, yes, our government did wrong things, but we must put that past us now and unite behind the flag and go invade whoever's being invaded the next week.
Well, I entirely agree. I think the executive is got even more advantage today than they did 40 years ago.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The abuse of the executive orders. And remember, Nixon actually fired his special prosecutor. And that was unconstitutional, and they didn't even hold him to task on that one here. So we could see Obama basically, go the same path. He's clearly in Richard Nixon territory in his mindset. And this could get really, really ugly before it's all over. We already know they've been intimidating witnesses on Benghazi. They've been re-editing the official story of Benghazi before it went to Congress. There's already evidence of a clear cover-up here. We may see witnesses simply vanish from the face of the earth. There is nothing that is beyond these people. The question right now is not what is our government capable of. The question is what is the government not capable of? What is too far for this government to consider? And at this point, the answer appears to be nothing.
I hope we don't find that out.
We may not have much of a choice on that one. The only thing that would really derail this is the collapse of the economy, and that would call off everything, including the war, and I'm willing to go down that route. Thank you for the call. We're going to switch over to Trey in Houston. Aloha, Trey. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I didn't see it on your... there's two things, the three things I want to talk about. The United States is a miracle country. I mean, we can get a guy with fresh blown off legs can ride around upright in a wheelchair without a tourniquet and not bleed to death. That's a medical miracle. Mm-hmm. The other one is this Bloomberg story. I don't know if you heard about that, where the reporters, there was a rumor, Bloomberg reporters had a rumor that somebody had been fired. So Bloomberg, they call it, traders call Bloomberg the Bloomberg. It's the biggest data server in the world. I mean, people shop for stock. They do picks, they do analysis on that system, and it all goes through. We got to take a break for commercials. Stay on the line, Trey. We're going to come back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Trey in Houston, and you had a comment about Bloomberg. It goes along with this AP phones being tapped and all this other stuff. What happened is these reporters had a rumor that somebody at one of those welfare banks, and can you imagine all the money NYC gets for hurricanes, but they get bonuses after they get money from us. Mm-hmm. But they 144 billion bonus. But anyway, these reporters at Bloomberg had heard a rumor that somebody had been fired. They went down to the webmaster at Bloomberg, the guy who can, and they called it the Bloomberg. It's a massive system. It's a pretty good system. And they went down there and they got the login records for this guy that was in their rumor. And then they called him and asked him about it. Well, how come he hasn't logged in for 5 days? Now you can think, okay, that's just a simple, did he log in or not? If you think about it,
Okay, Trey, Trey?
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time following you, and I think our listeners are too. What is it you're trying to tell us that happened?
I'm trying to tell you that a private database, a private data service, Bloomberg, that every bank in the world uses, the reporters for Bloomberg went and asked the webmaster for that database for the login schedule of somebody that was in a rumor that had been rumored to have been an executive that had been rumored to be fired.
Okay,
from,
Trey, you're not making any sense. I'm sorry. I'm going to let you go here because when you say the word rumored 4 times in a row, and remember, effective communications is because your listener or your reader doesn't know what's in your mind. It's called writer's occlusion or speaker's occlusion. And so effective communication is you briefly tell people what you're going to tell them, then you tell them in detail, then you sum up and say this is what it means. And if you just start wandering around with all these little bits and pieces and it doesn't seem to make any sense, well, I'm sure the government will hire you to write the next Warren report because that's how that was organized. But I'm sorry, Trey, but I had no idea where you were going or what you were trying to say here. Now, a couple of stories that are coming out. The spin cycle is cranking up. The propaganda corps is on overtime, double time, triple time right now. The White House is now admitting, this is coming out of B4N.info, the White House is now admitting they knew of the IRS scandal, but did nothing while it was going on. So Obama's statement that he only learned of it last Friday, that he made public on the record yesterday, is now no longer operational. And their new spin is that the IRS apology for targeting activists is not evidence of guilt. What is the? There's no there. Depends on what the definition of is. We've heard this kind of weasel wording before. They're talking like lawyers. And they're not talking like Americans. Now, the other spin that's coming out now, and we're seeing this start to appear all over the place, is that because these patriot groups and Occupy and Tea Party were espousing positions that were not in support of the government, that it is the IRS's job to give these entities additional scrutiny. That's the new spin. The IRS is just doing their job, targeting protesters and political dissidents. And no, it isn't. The IRS is supposed to be about generating revenue for the government. And this specific targeting of these political groups is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution. So the propagandists are getting really desperate now. And the whole argument of this whole story, and let's say this came from RINF.com, where they're basically saying that, yes, anybody who challenges the government ought to be due extra scrutiny by the IRS and the FBI. No, we are due no scrutiny at all until we have committed a crime. And so far, speaking out in protest to government malfeasance is still protected speech under the First Amendment to the Constitution. As that other caller said, it's a Bill of Rights. It's not a Bill of Suggestions. Now then, getting over to Europe and what's going on over there, the economic news continues to be just horrible. And we understand why. When you have a private central bank issuing the public currency as a loan at interest, debt grows faster than available money supply. It is by design. It is a pyramid scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme, and sooner or later it must crash. And because global banking has tied all of these private central banks together, they are on the verge of collapsing all together at the same time. I say good. The public currency has to be a public utility, not just another private money-making venture for the money junkies. Now, David Cameron is reacting to this growing movement in Great Britain to get out of the European Union. He's obviously pro-EU, pro-globalism, and he's saying, oh, it's very strange that people would want to leave the European Union. How can anybody not want to be in the European Union? Well, why don't you take a look at countries like Greece and Cyprus and Spain and Portugal and see what's happened to them because of the blessings of the European Union. Apparently, Cameron is now getting ready to submit his own bill for a referendum. Great Britain's been talking about holding a public referendum about staying in the European Union. Cameron has absolutely condemned it. Now he's writing his own, which we may presume contains certain little trapdoors and loopholes and back-channel things that will allow him to keep in the EU regardless of what the British people want. Got to take a break for commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones. Rob in Minnesota. Aloha, Rob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Long time no call. I've been kind of been living parallel lives with you, so I've been trying to fight the battle of the bulge here, and the best time to go to the Y is during your show, so I have to catch the podcast instead of live, but I always try to catch it. So, but anyway, the reason I'm calling is everyone else, it seems to have fallen into their memory hole, but when Obama was first elected, wasn't the big scandal that all these car dealerships that had been car dealerships for a long time, the ones that didn't support Obama, that supported McCain, all of a sudden they lost their car dealership license?
Yes, as part of the auto bailout they started. Yeah, that was a huge thing. There was a lot of partisan targeting back then as well.
So that's basically kind of the same way, they're doing the same thing, the IRS against the Tea Party people. It's, partisan focusing on your...
And it's not just confined to the IRS. I mean, political blacklistings. I mean, I've been blacklisted Hollywood twice now. I don't know if that's a record or not, but I wear it with pride.
And with, with now they're saying, well, the gun ownership list will be, like the no-fly list. You'll just find yourself that you're on it without, that you can't own a firearm or you can't buy ammo because you're on this list. And, well, we're not exactly sure why, but could it be that, well, you're a loyal Tea Party or you're a loyal Republican, and therefore they've determined that you shouldn't be able to get ammo anymore?
Yeah, well, I mean, these lists are completely unconstitutional. People just get put on them. I remember not too long ago when Barack Obama was going out to the major banks and saying, please don't do business with gun dealers and gun manufacturers any longer and just starve them for operational capital. Turned out most of the gun makers are pretty much self-funded at this point in their operations, and a lot of them are now moving from the anti-gun states to the pro-gun states, which are passing all kinds of tax incentives to get those jobs to move into their states. So it was a failed policy, and it was rather brain dead to begin with.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Say, I remember back during the Nicaragua Contra hearings, the only television station I could get, was they had the hearings on, and I was inside working on my floor, tearing it up and replacing it. And so, yes, I remember George Schultz standing up there, and he looked just as nervous. He would have been a good candidate as a spokesperson for Depends diapers, the way it looked like. But I just thought he would have made a perfect Sergeant Schultz. I know nothing, and
I have no recollection. What is it? Is there something in the water in Washington D.C. that all these people are suffering from Alzheimer's disease and can't remember yesterday?
But I also remember at the time I just wanted somebody to just say, book 'em, Dano.
Oh, well, we all wanted to see that, and the problem is we sat on our butts and we relied on Congress to do its job, and it really didn't. It was just another, yes, people did bad things and so many are to blame. It would be unfair for us to prosecute any one of them, and the usual song, and the same thing's going to happen here again. It is a waste of time for the American people to rest on their butts and wait for Congress to do the right thing. Congress has never done the right thing. They absolutely have. What we need to do is, and I'll let you talk in a little bit, but I want to make this point here. We're already seeing a full court press in the propaganda coming out of the White House. They're, as I said in the last segment, they're saying that, well, the IRS's job is to specifically target these political opponents of the administration. No, it isn't, and that was a big deal, of course, with Richard Nixon's enemies list and why it was unconstitutional for him to be doing that. And now they're saying basically, yeah, it's just a witch hunt, and now the White House has actually come out and admitted they did know this was being done. And they're saying the fact that the IRS has apologized does not really constitute legal proof of guilt. So they're falling back on lawyering talk. to try and get out of this mess. But the American people, by and large, the majority of them are not lawyers. They expect straight talk from the government. They expect the government to be truthful, transparent, and honest, and they're not getting it. And the longer it goes on with this lawyer talk as a substitute for a clear explanation, the more and more the people are going to be suspicious. Our opportunity right now, those of us in the independent media, those of us in the Patriot movement, is to use this opportunity where even the corporate media is talking about all these scandals to go back to all of our friends and family who are sort of on the fence of whether or not they could trust the government and say, look, I hate to say I told you so. Actually, I rather like it, but I did tell you so. And get people to look past the scandal at what is going on behind the scenes. Going past, what really happened in Benghazi. What does it mean when we have a Nixon clone sitting in the White House with an enemies list using the IRS to target people? And I'm already seeing all across the net all these articles about how the 16th Amendment wasn't ratified are starting to pop up all over the place. The Sullivan versus United States case where Judge James C. Fox says on the court record the 16th Amendment wasn't really ratified. All of this stuff is starting to percolate up, and people are paying attention to it now.
Yeah, I'm kind of noticing, though, too, it's still split on party lines, and so the point I was going to make before, because I get all the Republicans tell me, oh, yeah, Fast and Furious, Benghazi. I'm going, look, Fast and Furious is just the same policy that's been going on, both parties, are involved with it. Before, Fast and Furious was Gun Walker, Gun Runner. It goes all the way back to Nicaragua.
Yeah, well, it's been an ongoing thing. I've been studying all this stuff for 20 years. But for those people who are out there who are defending Obama because of their party affiliation, I want to remind you all of something. Once before in history, there was a political party that demanded your loyalty to the party above your own sense of what's right and wrong, and those guys were all wearing swastikas. Do you want history to remember you as being in that same category? Or are you going to exercise your sense of moral outrage and your own knowledge of what is right and wrong and what is America? Or are you going to sell all of that so that you can go on waving your flag and saying, I'm a member of this party. See, I'm an important human being. I have a flag and a button.
A movie that I've been recommending people look at, because it's kind of fun and it kind of shows the rise of the Nazi Party, is a movie. I can't remember how old it is, but it was called Swing Kids.
Never saw it.
Oh, it's pretty good. It's about the guys that were following American jazz and the big band dancing while the Nazis were coming to party. So it chronicles the lives of these high school kids, and how they drift to either side of that political shift.
These days I avoid movies with Nazis in them. I'm totally burned out on it. We've all been raised with constant saturation. Hitler, Nazis. When I was actually asked to review the movie Shutter Island by Martin Scorsese, and the instant he started parading Nazis at us, I said, that's it. I do not like this movie. And I'm tired of it. I am tired of it. I'm tired of this. Does Hollywood not have any other storyline left in it other than Nazi, Hitler, terrorist, Muslims bad? That seems to be the entire... No wonder filmmaking is leaving Hollywood and going out to the rest of the world.
I agree 100%. The only thing I try to tell people when they ask me, why are you doing this? Why do you care? And I said, well, geez, if you were growing up in Germany and you knew something was wrong, what would you do about it? And, of course, since that time, I'm talking about when my brain was in a different, mindset where I realized that we've been told a lot of lies about World War II, that I drank the Kool-Aid before I was on, I had the normal schooling and everything, and so I believed all the Holocaust stories. Now after Republic broadcast, now I have a lot of questions to ask, but I have to go out and deal with the general public, and so that's my only reply when they ask, why am I doing what I'm doing, is because this is the greatest experiment that mankind has ever had. This country is only a couple hundred years old plus, and it's the first time that tyranny didn't rule the world. And we don't have to be serfs under a tyrannical government.
Well, they're trying to get us back. They're trying to get us back to there. I have a lot of people who ask me why I do what I do, especially considering what it has cost me and my wife in terms of material comfort. And of course, at my age, it's not like I have all that much of a life to worry about in the future.
Right there.
But I view it as the highest moral imperative, that we leave to future generations a better world than was left to us. And at this point, we're pretty much failing that. Got to let you go here. The phone lines are loading up. We're going to switch to Brian in Ohio. Aloha, Brian. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Just thought I'd share a phone call I had yesterday to the IRS Commissioner's office.
Yes.
I called them and I told them I'd like to apologize for cheating on my taxes for the last 20 years. They put me on hold, and they came back in a minute, and they said, "Is there anything else?" And I said, "Well, I just wanted to get my point across." And the lady says, "Well, you've done that."
I love it.
But I think everybody should call.
Oh, yeah. We're sorry.
That's all I got.
All right. That's a good one there. We're going to switch over to Alex in Texas. Aloha, Alex. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Good afternoon. I was calling because I for the past 2 weeks, I've been researching the entire history of World War II as I learned it, because I used to be a debate buff when I was in college, and World War II was a forte of mine. Well, what I went to school for is architecture. One of my first jobs at a school was designing a crematorium. And when I started, looking into the specifics about how a human body burns, that's when I first started to question my own belief about everything that I had been taught and everything I thought I was a buff about, when it came to debate. And then I actually took my own money and I went to Germany and I, went through all the non-guided tours. And I got to tell you, sometimes even when you say some things about the Nazis, I'm just like, does he know this? That this is not necessarily the way that we've been painted? I mean, propaganda, it's just like how you say, it's to form a perception about that specific time. It doesn't necessarily, it's about what's real right then and there in the actuality of the moment, not necessarily what you can back up with facts and evidence. And, it's very funny that when you go back to trying to make your own decisions and you try to look at everything, you got more questions at every thread that you pull at than you have answers, and it's just, I speak German, I'm pretty fluent in it, and, when I read old speeches and I listen to old recordings and I hear what the translations are, and I'm like, he's not saying that, right?
Yes.
And they're like, well, it's out of context. And I'm just like, okay, fine, no problem. But, I could show you, I could pull together plenty of videos and plenty of audio files that could show you that Hitler is saying, I don't want this war.
Oh, yeah. Very well documented. I mean, Roosevelt was actually having the U.S. Navy sink German merchant shipping in the Atlantic, trying to goad Hitler into a response, and Hitler refused to bite because he knew he did not want to do that.
I've also got some copies, from some federal copies from the government of Germany that show that there was 26 different attempts by cable to broker peace before the 1940s. And actually, I used to be a history buff, and I used to think that, one of Hitler's biggest blunders was letting the expeditionary force go at Dunkirk. And come to find out, he was showing them mercy. And he was showing them that he didn't want to fight. He didn't want to annihilate anybody.
No, he wanted the war shut down there, but you need to go back, if you read the works of Winston Churchill, it's very clear in Churchill's own words, the goal of the war wasn't merely to defeat Germany, but to smash its industrial base and to force it back onto a private central bank. because when Germany broke free of private central banking, they became an economic and industrial power against which the nations enslaved to private central banks couldn't even begin to compete. And that was the real... In fact, Churchill once said, if we can't get this war with Germany going, meaning World War II, we will have fought World War I in vain. It was all about maintaining British economic and industrial supremacy in the world against a nation that was not being hamstrung by a private central bank.
With that notion, can I respectfully and humbly ask you for a favor?
Mm-hmm.
Please, can you be, whenever you speak about the Nazis, can you be a little bit more clear about exactly how you mean they were being oppressive and they were trying to do harm to people? You know,
let me. We're coming to the end of the segment. I'm going to have to let you go here, and I want to be clear about it. I'm no fan of the Nazis, primarily because I don't agree with a lot of their policies, and ultimately they failed to be a government that benefited their nation, which is the ultimate crime here. When you are forced into a situation of war and confrontation, sooner or later, everybody's doing bad things on both sides. Firebombing of Dresden, the starvation of the German POWs. A lot of bad things happen in war, and the history books are written by whoever won. But ultimately, all of these wars were about preserving the power of the banking cartel, the private central banks. And if you go back, and I've got this article I wrote, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. I'm going to reprise it to the front of whatreallyhappened.com so you can read it. This thing has gone viral around the world, and people are writing me saying, all of a sudden, this stuff makes sense that we have had to endure for 200 years. And it's all about protecting private central banking against anybody who dares to stand up and say there's a better way to run a nation's economy, whether that's Saddam Hussein selling his oil for euros, Muammar Gaddafi and his gold dinar, Congress refusing to renew the charter for the First Bank of the United States, Germany kicking out their private central bank and going with a state-issued currency. Every one of those incidents resulted in a war manufactured and crafted by the private central bankers. And they're trying to do it again to prop up their little Ponzi scheme. All righty, we're coming up. Boy, Manny, I'm going to need you to reprise the list of callers because I'm not sure exactly where we are. And when we come back from these commercials, we're going to go back to the phones. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones. Jason in Ohio. Aloha, Jason. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I wanted to jump back on the IRS thing and just say I agree with you completely that Congress probably won't do anything.
That's right.
Because our local representative here, Mike Turner, has already come out and said, yes, it's horrible and it's wrong, but it's not illegal.
It is illegal. It is illegal. It's a violation of the Equal Protection Clause.
They're saying it's not. As a matter of fact, they're putting up hasty little bills to try to deal with it. I believe some guy named Jeff Slate in the Senate put up one, and Mike Turner put up one in the House to try to deal with this.
Well, there's really no dealing with it. If it was an impeachable offense under Richard Nixon, it's an impeachable offense under Barack Obama. And we know these politicians are going to say whatever they think they can get away with, and we're wasting our time waiting on the Congress or even arguing with them. What we need to do is to shift this debate into the public, into the American people, and have them talking about it and not sitting on their rear waiting for Congress to tell them what to think.
Oh, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Turner's no friend of the Tea Partiers anyways. All he does is funnel tax dollars into defense contractors over here by Wright Pat anyways. So.
All right, anything else?
Just let your listeners know that there's a drone command center over here in the Springfield Air National Guard base here in Ohio. That's all I got.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to let you go. And getting back over here to this situation in Europe, where David Cameron is saying, how strange that they'd want to leave the European Union. But the polls of the public, both inside and outside the European Union, is showing that the most people now have an unfavorable view of the European Union. They're watching how this European Central Bank and these money junkies have absolutely strip-mined the place. And because the vast majority of us are not money junkies, we see this as a bad thing. And so the Poles are definitely against staying in the EU. The British want out of it. And all of these leaders of these European nations who have signed on to this whole union and globalization agenda, they're trying to figure out some way to continue selling this lemon to the people of their respective countries, and they're running up against a brick wall. And remember, when the European Union starts to come apart, when nations start breaking away and going back to their own currencies, when they start defaulting on all that manufactured debt coming out of that European Central Bank, those credit default swaps, $90 trillion worth of them sold by Wall Street, will start to come due. Wall Street does not have the money to pay those claims. It's a repeat of AIG, but on a much grander scale. Where's Wall Street going to get that cash? They're going to try and get it from you. That's why they want to take away your guns. Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And over at BusinessInsider.com, they have an article basically saying the same thing that we've been saying here for quite some time. The euro is destroying Europe. And it is doing so through this very simple mechanism of issuing all of the European currency as a loan at interest, which by design produces more debt than money with which to pay that debt. It's that whole 11th marble situation. No nation enslaved to a private central bank issuing the public currency as a loan at interest escapes that debt trap. It's intended to rule that country and its people for the benefit of the bankers by this artificially created manufactured debt. And it is no more legitimate a form of governance than rule by divine right or rule by slavery. And it is time for the human civilization to evolve to a new form of self-governance. Rule by the people, of the people, and for the people, rather than rule by the bankers, for the bankers, and by the bankers, which is really where we are right now. Remember, we've got Alan Greenspan on video saying the Federal Reserve is answerable to no federal government agency. They see themselves as the government of the nation. And the problem with having a banker ruling the nation is he's not ruling it for your benefit, but for his. They're literally trying to go back to feudalism and serfdom. That's their ideal. The land owns the people rather than the people owning the land. Every single nation enslaved to a private central bank issuing the public currency as a loan at interest is hopelessly mired in unpayable debt and hovering at the edge of collapse, and this is not a coincidence. Now, I want to talk about the gun grabbers and the police who are turning out to be more of a problem than they're really worth here. Over in Philadelphia, contrary to the gun grabber propaganda, the number of violent crimes declined last year in Philadelphia. So did assaults on police officers, but the number of police shootings shot up, way up. The police are getting out of control. Maybe they're on SSRIs. Maybe it's all this police training by these Israeli security companies. Maybe it's because the police departments are hiring returning veterans from the war zone who in their SSRI-addled brains are still in the war zone and act like it. Out in Cotati, California, there was a video that surfaced where the police were basically kicked down the door into a home over a domestic disturbance, which didn't appear to be happening. And when they walked in, they saw somebody taking a video of the police intrusion, and they tased them. Now, the courts have ruled repeatedly that Americans have a right to videotape the police out in public and certainly within their own private property. So these police committed criminal assault on the person with the video camera, and they should be held to account for it. They won't be. Meanwhile, there's this growing scandal where out in California where the police stopped an individual to find out if he was an intoxicated person. Police had called in and said, oh, there's this drunk person wandering around the neighborhood. claiming that he resisted them, these police beat him to death on the sidewalk, then went around the immediate area confiscating all the witnesses' cameras, saying they needed the images for the resulting investigation that was going to happen. Now, all the police have a right to is a copy of your photos and videos for their investigative purposes. They don't have a right to take your physical camera. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the third hour of our show today. Dan is now sitting in our control room ready to answer the phone when you call on in. The phone number, as always, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Getting on to some science issues. Actually, before we do that, I'm seeing a story coming across the desk right now. Apparently, the Mitt Romney campaign has now jumped on board this whole IRS gate, saying that they are of the opinion their fundraising was also being targeted by the Internal Revenue Service. Could be, could not be. Obviously, everybody's seeing this as an opportunity to settle some old scores. And the White House and its supporters are still out there saying nothing was really done. It's only an allegation. Even with the IRS admitting they did it, that's technically not proof of guilt. Just all these lame lawyering. We talked about that one story coming out there saying that it is right and proper for the IRS to specifically target opponents to the president. And, of course, that is complete nonsense. The IRS is supposed to be about revenue and funding the government, not about political control and repression. If it was impeachable under Richard Nixon, it's impeachable under Obama. And that really is where it is. You've got the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution that says laws have to be applied equally and fairly to all parties, all genders, all ages, all groups. And this is a clear violation of that. And from what that other caller is saying, all of Obama's supporters are trying to all of a sudden get laws introduced into Congress saying, well, what Richard Nixon was going to be impeached for is okay for Obama to do because he's our party and we're going to stand up. This is going to blow up. And I'll tell you for a very simple reason. I've talked about this before. For propaganda to work against a population, it has to present a clear, unified image of whatever you're supposed to be thinking. Our federal government has gotten far too deeply into the habit of relying on public relations firms and advertising companies to sell its message to the public. And they've gotten into the habit of focus groups and trial balloons. And the problem when you have all these trial balloons out there is it blurs the narrative. Everybody's getting all these different stories coming forward. And when you're advertising shampoo or a car or something and you have a trial balloon that doesn't work, you simply pull it back and you go with a different approach, and the audience doesn't care because, after all, it's just shampoo or a car or a movie they're talking about. But when you're talking about politics and you see all these constantly changing stories, it blurs the message. And you lose control of that narrative. You lose that clarity that propaganda demands, and that's exactly what's going on here right now. Obama says, I didn't know about it before last Friday. Now they're saying, yeah, the White House did know. That last story is no longer operational. We're going on to today's piece of propaganda, and the corporate media may swallow it, or not, considering how angry they are over this AP phone record scandal. But the ordinary American people don't know there's a bunch of rules they're supposed to be following in accepting these official government pronouncements. We have long memories. We have a very powerful collective memory called the Internet, where we go back and we look at all the lies and contradictions. And when you're confronted with all of those lies and contradictions, you come to understand on a very gut level you're not being dealt with straight. And when the government lies to you, it's disrespecting you. It's not treating you as an intellectual or political equal with whom they have to basically be straight. They're treating you like property, like livestock, like a herd when they lie to you. And, of course, if you've studied the Constitution, you will find that nowhere in there is the government authorized to lie to the American people about anything. Now they're trying to basically pass a law saying it's okay for the government to conduct propaganda operations against the American people. Not that they haven't been doing it all along, but now they just want it to be legal so they don't have to worry about people screaming, this is propaganda. Yeah, that's our job now. But it's not authorized by the Constitution, and the 10th Amendment prohibits the government from assuming that right. lying to the people is not an enumerated right for the government under the Constitution. So when that government lies to you, they act outside the law, outside the Constitution. They delegitimize themselves with every single lie. And now the legitimacy of the entire government itself is on the line. And they're panicking. They're panicking. All righty, getting back to health issues. Apparently there's a big, huge scandal. This is being reported over at ABC in Australia, that apparently they have discovered 45% of women in the state's psychiatric hospitals have been sexually assaulted. 45%! Wow! I can imagine what the head of these hospitals is saying. What? She claims I tied her to the bed and did the lemonade and whipped cream trick on her? Don't listen to her. She's crazy. I have been dealing with these smears on my character ever since I left the church. Talk a little bit about computer file sharing and piracy, and of course the Motion Picture Association of America and the Recording Industry Association of America are out there screaming that it is the pirates that are responsible for their decline in revenues. And I agree content piracy is wrong, but I think they're being unfairly scapegoated. The reason motion picture revenues and music revenues are in decline is twofold. First of all, the economy has dried up that disposable income with which we go out and buy discs. Second of all, the movies are all looking the same. I mean, they're going to... Everything's a remake of something we've seen before, and it's all politically correct to sell the correct war message. And we've already seen that 500 times already. The music industry has adopted the trappings of the rock music revolution of the 1960s, but without its social content, which is what made it truly revolutionary. And we have basically found out music companies these days are literally using computers to mix new music to sound as close as possible to what was the hot seller a couple of years ago. And so it all sounds the same, and they're trying to sell it on the basis of the cute, scantily clad girl on the front of the package. But if you've already heard the same kind of music before, you tend not to buy it anymore. But these corporate executives don't want to admit their own decisions in terms of projects to greenlight are the problem with the declining revenues. They're going to blame the pirates. And now we're getting this interesting story. This came out of Torrent Freak, where somebody went out and did a study of people who are stealing content and found out these are predominantly wealthy kids, wealthy people, who on average are spending on legitimate purchases of music and movies 3 times as much as honest customers who don't engage in content piracy. And so the pirates are actually spending more on these movies and TVs legally than the honest customers. And that sort of undermines that whole idea of blaming the pirates for the declining revenues in the corporate media. Let's see. Interesting story. We're talking about the state of education and how it's really, certainly in this country, gotten away from education and gotten very much into indoctrination. There's a story coming out of Great Britain. This was in the Daily Mail, where this private primary school issued a ban on their students having a best friend among their classmates, on the excuse that those who were not best friends with somebody were feeling left out and ostracized. People tend to socialize. We tend to make friends. We tend to have best friends. What this is all about is further isolating humans from each other to keep them dependent on the official government statement, what the teacher says, what the corporate media says. It's just more brainwashing. And the parents are actually having to pay to have this done to their kids here. Apparently, before he got into looting the phone records of the corporate media, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder has declared that parents do not have a right to homeschool their children. That you will send your children to the public schools for their dose of proper indoctrination. And it's a further erosion of parental rights to choose what education their children shall be given. And this is a very alarming statement coming from Holder, that parents don't have a right to choose what education their kids will get. That's the job of the state. Those children belong to the state. They're not your property just because you bred them and feed them and house them. They belong to the state. We saw that kind of attitude one time before. Again, over in Nazi Germany. Parents were not given any control over their school curriculum or the child's education. Those who argue for that get demonized. You remember way back in the 1960s when the Black Panthers first formed up? And forget about the later demonization about the Black Panthers. The original agenda for the Black Panthers was breakfast for the ghetto children so they didn't go to school hungry, and local control of the school curriculum so the local schools could train the kids to fit into the local economy, to be prepared to function, to have jobs in the local economy. And that made them a huge threat because even back then the federal government wanted to control what the schools were teaching the kids. Interesting little story. This is coming out of Refreshing News. Down in Florida, 16-year-old girl, exemplary student, A student, did a little science fair project that resulted in a small detonation on school grounds. Not in a classroom. Nobody was hurt. She went outside and said, watch, this is going to go boom. And it did. She's been charged with a felony. You're disincentivizing science education in this country, and that is a big mistake. Going to take a break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we get back to more of the science stuff, the propaganda to protect the presidency, to protect the credibility of the administration, and indeed the entire government, is ramping up already to absurd lengths, and I suppose we should not be surprised, but already we're starting to see stories that anybody focusing on IRS Gate or DOJ Gate or Benghazi, they're just being racist. They've always hated Obama because he's black, and that's the only reason they're making a big stink about this now. So it's getting pretty pathetic when they're down at it's racism. It's all racism. They're thrashing. They're in thrash mode. They can't find a narrative to support the actions of this president. And as I said before, do not make the mistake of sitting on your butt, waiting for Congress to do the right thing, waiting for the corporate media to do the right thing, although some in the corporate media are angry enough that they might. But don't wait for them. The proper place for this discussion and analysis is with we, the people. You need to go out and talk to your friends and family and say, look, this is what's going on. This is an impeachable offense. They were going to impeach Richard Nixon for this. Obama's already caught out lying. Carney, in his press conference this morning, said the White House was notified of the IRS targeting the Tea Party several weeks ago. Jake Carney's own words, putting the lie to Obama's statement yesterday that he only found out about it from the news on Friday. So Obama's already flat out caught lying about this. We need to keep the pressure on this whole situation because this is an opportunity to wake up what's left of the American people who are still blindly following Obama, hoping for change. And like Obama, they're blaming Rush Limbaugh because Obama can't make progress. They're blaming everybody because as a class, these people in Washington, D.C. did not get where they are by accepting responsibility for their failings. All a politician does is take credit for everything good that happens and find somebody to blame for everything bad that happens. That's how they get where they are. And they're doing it again. They're going to do it again. Unless we in the independent media hold them to account on this. And we may find allies in the corporate media. They're angry. If the DOJ thought that admitting and announcing they were going through the phone records of the Associated Press was going to chill the corporate media and get them back to not paying attention to what's going on with Benghazi, this has backflashed on them. Don't forget, the White House had a private meeting last Friday with the representatives of the 14 top corporate media outlets to basically steer them in the correct direction they should follow on Benghazi. And that tells us Obama is afraid that the real nature of Benghazi is going to get out. And everything that has come out so far, including standing down the CIA at the annex, standing down the special forces, supports the theory that this was a staged PR stunt to support Obama's re-election that got out of hand and blew up in his face. Getting a lot of this blowing up in the face from this administration. Remember one of the books that came out following Nixon's downfall was called The Best and the Brightest, because that was always the assumption that the White House had the very best minds and the brightest people working for them. And it turned out not to be the case. Deep Throat actually said that when he was blowing the whistle on Watergate. He said the truth is these guys really aren't very smart. They just think they are, and they're true believers. They literally have this attitude that everything that they do serves a higher purpose and the law just isn't a factor. And some of them are very bright, some of them aren't. Mostly they're just willing to go along doing these things that are against the law, unethical and immoral, and you build a whole government around that. Sooner or later it's going to start blowing up. So, let's see what else we have going on here. I'm going to come back to this before the top of the show. I'm going to rally the troops, as it were. It's a call to keyboards, a call to Rivero's Rangers to go out there and make sure this story reaches all of America, even those people still hopelessly enslaved to Obama's myth and aura. A lot of Americans are ready to ask questions. We need to get out there and make sure they know where to find the answers here. Let's see. Interesting little story. DLA Piper. This is one of the largest law firms in America. 4,200 lawyers. And to have their little get-together annual meeting, they chartered an entire Royal Caribbean cruise ship. Where's a U-boat when you really need one? That's what I want to know. All right. Coming up on a commercial break, join us on the air, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and this thing is already growing out of control. Cleta Mitchell, one of Washington's most respected elections attorneys, in an interview with Newsmax, says that IRS officials in Washington, high-ranking, were fully aware of the agency's campaign to target political dissenters and conservative groups, and said back when it was going on, she was told that applications for two of the groups she was representing for tax-free status, she was told point blank they would have to be approved or denied in Washington, D.C. Now, nobody is going to sit there and believe that the IRS went and engaged in this activity without the encouragement and knowledge of the President of the United States of America. And now we already know that Obama was lying when he said he first learned about it on Friday, because we have Jake Carney admitted in the press conference the White House was notified weeks ago. Didn't say how many weeks. Could be 20 or 30 at this particular point. Going to go to the phones here. Tate in Michigan. Aloha, Tate. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. To me, it appears, with all the attention to Benghazi and the IRS, and the wiretapping and Associated Press, is that the media is really focusing on that so much to get the attention going there, because I actually believe that the power structure is done with their whoopee cushion known as Barack Obama. And, maybe they are lying to him to get him into a situation where he's done, because he won't get this war going with Iran, it seems like. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're ready to replace him right away with somebody who's ready to get these wars going, because they need one bad. Things are falling apart really fast.
They really do. I think we were talking about yesterday the possibility that Israel, which is in control of the United States Congress to an extent Obama can only dream of, might very well decide to force him out and put President Biden in the White House, knowing that Biden will turn the key on the nuclear missiles without hesitation.
So maybe it's true. Maybe Obama didn't know anything about it until he read the paper. Maybe
no, I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. I don't buy that one at all. The heads of the IRS are not going to engage in this kind of criminal behavior without being ordered to from above. I'm not buying for a second that Obama did not know these things were going on. We've already caught him lying. He's lost the benefit of the doubt in this case.
I don't doubt that he's a liar, but don't you think the IRS works directly for the Federal Reserve, or is it actually from the White House?
The IRS works for the Federal Reserve, but Richard Nixon was able to tell the IRS, go target my enemies list, and they did, and it's an impeachable offense. I do not think the Federal Reserve would really care one way or the other what's going on in the political arena as long as the money keeps flowing to them. If the Federal Reserve really doesn't care who's in power as long as the money keeps flowing. The Federal Reserve always owns both candidates and both parties, and they don't really care. The whole idea of having different parties and candidates is a ruse to convince the American people we still have some kind of control over this nation. So, yes, Obama is a liar. I'm sure a lot of people are seeing an opportunity to get him out of office and replace him with Biden. And a whole lot of overlapping agendas are going to start hitting. But I'm not going to buy this idea that Obama is in any way, shape, or form innocent in all of this, okay? So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And the propaganda crew they're on overtime. They are definitely on overtime. And I'm not going to buy this nonsense that Obama didn't know. It's his job to know. If he wants to stand up there and say, I had no idea what the Internal Revenue Service was doing, I had no idea what the Department of Justice was doing, he should follow it with, I hereby tender my resignation effective immediately. We cannot accept and tolerate a government that says, I don't know, I don't remember, I'm not sure, haven't consulted my diary, I lied to my diary. Remember that one? Guy got caught lying before Congress, and they said, look, you're telling us one thing and you wrote in your own diary something else. And he said, well, I was lying to my diary. It's amazing stuff here. All right, back to the phones. Tom in Texas. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Brother Mike. Just when I think you cannot outdo yourself, you surprised me again. Great show.
Thank you.
But I wanted to tell you my experience in my many travels around this beautiful country of ours. I'm a construction worker, and, I chase the almighty dollar, and I travel around a lot. So I went to another state, and a friend of a friend of a friend got me a room in the town I was working, and one of the roomies I found out was from southern Russia, from the same area that the suspected Boston bombers in that area. So on my going-away party, I was there for about 8 months. And they gave me a little going-away party because invariably and literally you work yourself out of a job when you work construction.
Yes.
So on my going-away party, I found out that one of my roomies, his occupation from his hometown, he was a history teacher, middle school history teacher. So after a few drinks and some good food, and unfortunately this is my last day there, I asked him, okay, tell me the truth. Why did Adolf Hitler have such animosity towards the Jews? And I'm going to try to make it short.
Well, I really don't want to get onto that topic right now. We're trying to stay focused on the 21st century right now, and I've heard all kinds of different theories about it, whether he really had an animosity. Certainly he had an animosity to the private central bankers. And again, just like our current government is doing with the Muslims, he needed a group to drop the blame for everything that was going wrong on. But if you look at the way the international bankers organized that global boycott against Germany in 1933 to destroy their new economy when they broke free of the private central bank, I'm sure the German people had good cause to be very angry with the money junkies. And, in a way, the bankers created the crisis themselves. And their attitude is, we can abuse you, and when you strike back, that means you're evil and you're bad. And I'm not going to buy that any longer. All right, now, getting back to the present day here. Let's see, we're seeing all this other stuff that comes in. This story is just exploding all over the place. All right, a couple more let's see, did we have another call? No, we don't. All right, getting back to just cleaning up some science and other issues from left over from the last couple of days. Over at theexaminer.com, interesting, bizarre story coming out of Adana, Turkey. The head of the Health and Education Association, Fehmi Kaya, declared that atheism is a form of autism, that if you don't believe in the imaginary playmate in the sky, you are suffering a mental illness. Okay? And that's kind of a very bizarre situation here. I would argue that those that have a section of the brain that allows them to act as if something is real in the absence of any evidence are the ones who are mentally deficient. And in any event, there is a much stronger correlation between atheism and intelligence and education, and a much stronger correlation between autism and these heavy metal compounds in vaccines, like mercury and thimerosal. Now, as a mental experiment, look at an elephant. Once you see the elephant, you no longer need to believe elephants are real. You know it for a fact. Faith operates in the absence of knowing. In other words, faith can only exist in ignorance. And for this individual to come out there and say that atheism is a mental illness akin to autism, they're getting desperate out there. Getting very, very desperate. Then yet another study that is linking Monsanto's Roundup to autism. See, it's not atheism. It's this chemical assault that we are being soaked in by the money junkies who have lost all semblance of contact with humanity in that lust for another piece of paper with ink on it. And so like I was commenting the other day that, and I've got nothing against people getting rich by work and providing good products and good services. I admire people like Steve Jobs, who got rich off of Apple. I'm a huge admirer of James Cameron, and I gladly give him my money for DVDs of these wonderful movies that he makes, and I applaud what he has taken his money and done in terms of pushing the frontiers of oceanographic exploration. This is what capitalism is supposed to be. But we can't have an entire society that is driven into a mindless quest for pieces of ink and paper by a private banking system that by design creates more debt than money with which to pay that debt. Because along that path to grasping those pieces of ink and paper, we surrender the best part of our own humanity. We surrender our altruism. We surrender our idea that there should be a balance between the desire for wealth and the desire for a better society. Certainly for one we're going to leave our next generation. Yesterday I was down doing some shopping, and I saw this old man going from trash bin to trash bin, picking out the styrofoam containers and plates from the local restaurants there and scraping the last bits of food off of them. It's kind of like your Buddha on the road moment. And I know the money junkies don't have to look at that because they live in neighborhoods where the homeless people have been shipped out someplace else. But you can't look at that and say that this is a nation with a healthy economy, or it's even a nation with a balance between the desire for wealth and the need to take care of our population. And again, our government has no business sending a single penny of our tax money to any other country when we have Americans sleeping in alleys and eating out of trash bins, like I saw yesterday. And yes, I gave this guy the change that was in my pocket at the time. Wasn't much, but I gave it to him. I said, look, go get a healthy meal. Anyway, I think I mentioned this before. Over in Great Britain, the circuses are going to be banned from having wild animals. It sort of undermines the whole point of a circus. People aren't going to go to the circus just to see the clowns. They have C-SPAN for that. And this whole political correctness, and yes, I want the animals to be treated well and kindly and humanely. But when I was a kid and you went to the circus, part of what you went to the circus was to see the wild animals, to experience something outside your own immediate neighborhood. And I realize in the age of global media, we can see animals from all around the world indirectly, but the circus gave you the direct experience of the animals, especially if you lived in a town that didn't have a zoo. Meanwhile, over at Apple, apparently anything that you whisper to Siri is stored on Apple servers for up to 2 years. And I mention this in the context of the revelation that came out following the Boston false flag bombing, where the FBI basically admitted on air they were able to go back and review telephone and text message communications for the previous 2 weeks. So yes, the government is spying on you. They're recording everything that you do so they can go back and find something to frame you with if they need to. By the way, down in New Orleans, they still have not arrested any suspects for the shooting that took place over the weekend. Quite a contrast to Boston, where they came out and said, we've got these Arab Muslims and they did it, and you've got to think. Absolutely amazing here. Let's see. We've all heard about the sex offender registry. There are all these lists and registries that everybody's on. Terrorism registry, no-fly list. Next thing, they're going to start putting colored stars and triangles on our clothes around here. And apparently somebody did a study. Sarah Toft of Human Rights Watch found out that you can be put on a sex offender registry, which is a real black mark against your life, and you cannot get off of it. But you can be put on the list in some states simply if you're caught visiting a prostitute. If you are caught taking a leak in public, you can be put on the sex offenders list. This in an age where more and more private stores no longer have public restrooms, I might add. 29 states. If you are a teenager and you have consensual sex with permission with another teenager, you're still put on the sex offender registry. 32 states. Flashers and streakers are put on the sex offender registry. This is a completely inappropriate use. The sex offender registry was supposed to be about rapists and child molesters, not kids having a little bit of fun during spring break. Let's see. This is a funny story. There was this Orthodox Jewish woman who is banned by her religion from applying makeup on the Sabbath. And she got some of this Lancome 24-hour foundation so she could put it on before the Sabbath, look good through the Sabbath, and take it off after it was all over. And because Lancome, like most cosmetics companies, was overstating the quality of its product, this Jewish woman is suing them because the 24-hour foundation didn't last through the Sabbath. All right, we got a quick phone call here. Casey in Florida. Aloha, Casey. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon, Michael. Listen, I tell you, with your show, you miss a little, you miss a lot.
Yep.
I wanted to call in earlier, but I wanted to at least commend you and thank you for putting me on to the Cree bulbs.
Yeah, aren't those great?
I tried one out, and I'm really jazzed about it.
Yeah. No, we're about 2/3 converted here. In fact, this light that's lighting me here for the show is a Cree bulb. They are amazing. Already the compact fluorescent companies are trying to mount a propaganda campaign against them, saying that they put out too much UV light and they'll blind you. You'll go blind if you use these lights. And they don't put out anywhere near as much UV as the compact fluorescents do, but that's just how they're trying to preserve their market. And the Crees use much less electricity. They don't burn out. They don't catch fire the way the CFLs do. They don't have mercury vapor in them. They're not radioactive. But this is just the way corporate media works in this country. We're going to demonize this product to force you to buy this other product. But I'm absolutely sold on LED lights. It is the way to go. Any UV that they're putting out is absorbed by that coating and converted to white light. So it's a nonsensical claim there. Anything else?
I appreciate your putting that on your website because I saw the headlines and then you added your note on there. And then one more thing quickly, and I'll get off. If you recall, I'm retired law enforcement, but I'm old school. And but I tell you what, I really this thing with Kokesh in Washington D.C. I hope that doesn't go down because. I just, and I'll tell you what, if he goes through with it, I think I'm going to have to remove him from my Christmas card list. It's just a potential for too
bad
many
idea. Yes, you're
bad
right.
things to happen.
You are absolutely right.
Absolutely.
It is
I know what law enforcement has turned into, what they're capable of, and I mean, I don't even know everything they're capable of, but it just doesn't portend for anything that's going to help us, I don't believe.
No, it won't, and the D.C. police have already said they will have a confrontation with this march as they come across the border into Washington, D.C. It is tailor-made to destroy the Second Amendment. Got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, KC, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and this IRS gate is continuing to explode. More and more groups are coming forward and saying that as far as they can tell, they were being put under pressure by the IRS. They were being targeted for repression. It's spreading all over, and hand in hand with it, of course, is coming the pro-Obama propaganda to say, it's not a big deal. And the latest one is out here is, well, you know, George Bush used the IRS and the FBI and the CIA and the Secret Service to go after his opponents, and nobody did a big thing about that, which is known as the they all do it excuse. We can't prosecute Obama or impeach Obama for an impeachable offense because we let all these other people go, which is nonsense. We don't catch all the murderers in this country, but when we catch them, we do prosecute and charge and sentence them as a deterrent, hopefully. But if you really want to go back and throw George W. Bush in prison for his crimes, I'm not going to stand in your way. I'd see that as an occasion to throw a real party. You're right. The Republicans and the Democrats are equally guilty. Let's throw them all in prison. Let's impeach the whole lot of them, top to bottom. They're really reaching for any kind of a talking point where they can diffuse this situation. I think the most pathetic one is that, anybody making a big deal out of Benghazi or the IRS or the DOJ, they're just being racists. They hate Obama because he's black. No, we hate Obama because he is committing crimes, including war crimes. It's just amazing, amazing stuff. All right, we're coming up on the end of the show, and I'm going to come back and reprise one more time. This is a call to keyboards. This is a call to Rivero's Rangers. We have an unprecedented opportunity to go out and inform the American people, to find those Americans who are starting to ask questions about the true nature of the federal government. With the corporate media making a big deal about all these scandals, Americans are going to be asking questions. It is up to all of you to direct them to where they can get their answers. We already know the independent media has the high ground in the war for the minds of America. Rasmussen confirmed most Americans, the majority of Americans, slim majority, but still a majority, are coming here to the independent media to find out what's going on. And those numbers are going to go up. My numbers at what really happened are up significantly over the last couple of days. So people want to know the truth, and they deserve the truth. And it is up to you to help guide them gently to where they can find the truth. And if you run up against somebody who's out there screaming about, you're just being a racist, ignore them. There's always going to be morons and shills and trolls in society and FBI informants. Just go around them. Don't confront them. Don't waste your time arguing with people who are paid to argue with you to waste your time. Just go around them. Find the people who are receptive. Find the people willing to listen. Find the people who are ready to be shown the way to the real, true nature of the government of the United States of America. Reach out to them. Lead them gently across the bridge. You're not going to be able to get behind and shove them, but lead them gently across the bridge. It is time for outreach for the truth. There's the music. We got to head on out of here. I got to do another radio interview on somebody else's station, and we'll be back here tomorrow on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay well. Please support Republic Broadcasting. We're in the final round. It's a fight. It's a fist fight between the truth and the propaganda, and the last one standing wins. And we need your help. So on that note, thank you very much, and aloha, America.